Please find a seat, Hank. And this is a cell phone, which you will be turning off now. Okay, way to go, Ed. So welcome, everyone. Glad you could make it out today. Thank you for joining us for the last program of our spring session. So we get a couple of months off to rework things for next fall. So stay tuned in our newsletter, which you get through your membership, where you can sign up for it. And of course, we want you to be members, but we have a few announcements to start with. So I'd like a show of hands that everybody knows the name Chris Himes. Wow, it's pretty good. Anybody who doesn't? Okay, welcome to Redmond history. Okay, well, Chris served our community for many, many years. She was on our city council, was elected as our first female mayor in the city of Redmond, so females unite in leadership. That was in 1979, served one term and did some remarkable things while she was in office. She was instrumental in our park system, led by her buddy John Couch, right there. Raise your hand, John. Mr. Parks of Redmond. We now have, I think, 47 parks, right? Anyway, she built bridges, was here for getting some of the energy going and the invitation to a company called Microsoft that joined us up on Overlake and many other things while she was here. Well, last Saturday, Joe and Doris Townsend and I joined Chris's family in celebrating her 95th birthday, and she is sharp as a tack. And so she wanted me to make sure to greet you for her. Chris Himes, H-I-M-E-S. And if you Google Chris Himes or Christine Himes, it'll come up, and you'll see something called the Bridges of Redmond, and it's a story that was written about her and what she did here and so forth. It's a beautiful story. You know, I'm always pitching the importance of membership, so anyone that isn't a member yet can go in and join up afterwards. But Chris was also a lifetime member. And I want to just take a minute to talk about that. Lifetime members really help us sustain our activities here. And you may have noticed in the slides, there was one slide that had a bunch of names, 79 living members who are lifetime members. There were 29 others who have passed. Most of them were from descendants of pioneer families in the area. But they're not with us, but they invested in this society. Last month, we received donations of 3 new lifetime members. David Costanza. David, are you here? Did you slip in? Oh, yeah. He's still on Seinfeld, I guess. But I don't know him yet, but I want to meet him. And the other person is Linda Husi Yoshitaki, and also another longtime member from a pioneer family here in Redmond, who at this time doesn't know that he's a member yet. So, surprise. He's been an enthusiastic volunteer at our meetings, at the Saturday market, at our ice cream social and membership meetings that we've been having out at the Grange. Comes early, sets up chairs. There's a display right above the coffee out there every week, every month. It's a little different historic display. So, and again, he doesn't know that he's a member. But he's now a lifetime member because an anonymous donor, who is also a lifetime member, recognized and appreciated this individual's dedication to our society, which is pretty cool, and decided to gift him with a lifetime membership. Tom Hansen, could you come up here? All right, let's turn around here because where's our photographer? Patsy. Oh, here.
Yeah, it says volunteer. It's going to have a new button.
All right, sure. Shake my hand.
You're going to have a new flag on the name tag that says life member.
Now, don't forget.
Sure.
Excellent.
Okay, Tom. Now, we don't have time for you to talk. So, next meeting, though, we're going to carve out 15 minutes for you to tell your personal history.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
He said okay.
Anyway, thank you very
Some
much.
interesting stuff.
Well, I'm flattered, and I came out here with
Wait
my
a second.
parents.
Now, I know this will take 10 minutes, and we don't have time.
But this is my school, and I feel that I am obligated to come here to help out.
Okay, you got a minute and a half. How many years did you go to school?
Oh, I don't know, first grade. I went on to Lake Washington High School afterwards.
So-
I'm part of the olders but goodies. We got some people over here, and I feel obligated to come here and help out.
Did you go to school here in this building? Did you go to school here?
Yes, yes, from the first grade to the ninth grade.
Wow, in this building.
In this building.
Yes.
Yeah, his name is probably carved on some of the wall.
Well, thank you very much. I'm flattered.
Okay. Okay.
I just want to point out, years ago, Tom funded lifetime memberships for both of his parents also.
Okay, did you hear that? Lifetime membership for his parents. And now he is one, joining them. So April is National Poetry Month, so you can check out our display of poems in our collections in the display case right in the hallway out here as you leave. And also there's an exhibit of poems inspired by historical photos and artifacts from the society that's on display through April 19th at the Vala Art Center. And the Vala Art Center is just a nice little spot just across from our park and right in downtown Redmond, just on the north side of it. The center is open to the public on Saturdays and Sundays from 11 to 2, and this afternoon we'll be hosting a short writing activity there. So anyone interested in learning how to become a poet can show up there between 2 and 4 p.m. The Society kicks off our season in historic downtown walking tours on Sunday, led by historian Tom Hitzroth. This guy knows more details about everything Redmond than anybody, and he gives a 1.5 to 2 hour walking tour around the historic Redmond, pointing out all the features and answering lots and lots of questions. It's a $10 donation to enjoy that time with him. And there's a couple more scheduled which you can get off of our internet. And as I mentioned at our last meeting, it's the Society's 25th year, formed here in 1999. We had a little room on the far end of the school, and now we're in this larger room that you saw as you came in. And we have secured now the Red Oak Room in the brand new, soon to be open, Redmond Senior and Community Center. And we're going to have a celebration party on September 28th. So stay tuned for information on that. And now I'd like to read our land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples who continue to steward these lands and waters as they have since time immemorial. We recognize Washington's tribal and indigenous and native organizations which actively create, shape, and contribute to our thriving communities. The Redmond Historical Society is committed to doing our part to engage with and amplify the voices of Native peoples and tribes. And now, to get to why you're really here to hear this incredible program, I'll invite our board member, Deb Ackerstrom, to come up and introduce you to our speakers. Deb?
Good morning, everybody. So, there's supposed to be a... One moment. Oh, sorry.
I was sleeping. Holly's going, Joe, told you what to do. Okay, I got the clicker.
There, okay. That was then.
There's a different kind of bicycle.
This is now. Today we're going to hear about the history of biking in Redmond. Maybe you have always wondered what makes Redmond the bike capital of the Northwest, like the signs say. Presenting its story today is Joe Matthews, longtime president of the Redmond Cycling Club. The Cycling Club is a group of individuals joined together for inspiration, camaraderie, and enjoyment through challenging cycling. The club was started in 1978, has been a steward of one of the nation's premier endurance biking events, RAMROD, Ride Around Mount Rainier in one day. It was supposed to be celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, but you may have read in the paper the National Park Service has canceled the event, but Joe will share more of that with you. When he is not on a bike trail, Joe leads product, business design and development in technology and consulting industries. Joe and his wife Sharon moved to Redmond area in 1978 to raise their family of 3 children. Christian, 1998, I'm sorry. 1998. You weren't even born in 1978, right? Yeah. Anyway, the 3 kids are Christian, Jordan, and Leah. Please give a warm welcome to Joe Matthews.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Deb, come on back up. I just wanted to thank Deb for helping me get here today. We've been meeting for almost a year and a half on this project. And she's just fantastic, great energy and an attention to detail. So you have a wonderful person here. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
And I'm really kind of fortunate this morning. I'm surrounded by a bunch of friends. I'm looking forward to, I've already met I think a new set of friends. Thanks for coming up and talking already, and I can't wait to talk afterwards if you're interested. But in the friends that are around that I've already seen, I'm going to be bringing you up here and introducing you to, but I also would love to have my wife, my son Christian, and my daughter Jordan to stand up and say hi to you all. You got 4 out of the 5 of us. Number 5 is in San Francisco, and it's kind of funny that she's there because this is a photo of us back in 2011, and we had taken our first trip there, and I had coaxed the whole family into riding a bicycle, and the littlest one on the right really didn't like it that day, and she now sends us pictures every day of how beautiful the weather is down there, riding her bike all over San Francisco. As Deb mentioned, I was fortunate to come here in the 80s when my father took a job at Date.io down in Willows. And so my family's been here since the 80s, and Sharon and I have lived in Sammamish and near Hollywood Hill ever since. And there was a reference to Microsoft, and we were talking earlier, I spent a big part of my career at Microsoft, being one of the design leaders for Microsoft Windows. So that's a little bit of my tech background as well. We are going to do quick introductions and then we'll get back into the storytelling. But first I'd love to introduce to my left here someone who's very special to the cycling community. And I'm also going to introduce his wife because together they are cycling royalty in the Pacific Northwest. So I'd love for you to meet John Dixon.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I didn't know about this society, but I decided I'm going to be a lifetime member. Yeah, my name is John Dixon, and in 1983, I had an inspiration to create a new bicycle ride in the Northwest, and I made some good decisions. One of them was to turn them over to Redmond Cycling Club, and I will be telling you more about that. And I came up with the idea while bicycling over Cayuse Pass to create a new ride around Mount Rainier one day. So I'll be talking more about that later.
And Nikki, would you stand up?
This is my wife, Nikki. She did RAMROD in 1993 when we had the worst possible weather, snow pellets at Paradise and all the rain, line storms going over Cayuse Pass. Yeah, so she's a warrior.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Dickie. And then we still have more royalty. I want to introduce you to Aunt Mary. I call her Aunt Mary because that's the only name I know. Because for 2 decades, it's always been, you got to go talk to Aunt Mary. She's a cyclist and a good family friend. Julie, go ahead and stand up. Julie is the real Aunt Mary. And I'm going to say it anyway because I don't know if Aunt Mary, but Aunt Mary is 97 years young. And if there's good evidence that cycling's good for you, I think it's between these two really good. You want to say hi?
Well, back in I really feel a little illegitimate representing the Boeing Bike Club because though I worked at Boeing for a couple of years in personnel, most of my career was with American Red Cross. And in 1988, when I was 61, that's a long time ago, the Red Cross came up with one of these special retirement packages, you know. So I took it, and for the next 25 years, I biked 3 or 4 days a week with the Boeing Bike Club, which was a wonderful group. These days, you have to be a Boeing employee to join them, but I can't say enough good things. And we didn't do RAMROD, but we did Ride Around Mount Rainier in 3 days. That was an annual event, but so many wonderful people. And now that I'm 97, it's sad to say that an awful lot of my bicycling friends have passed away in recent years, but gosh, I had a marvelous time with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. So I'm not a historian, but bear with me. I had a lot of fun working with Deb to prepare, and every time I met with Deb, she said, you got to bring some history. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And then I'm like, you know, you got to talk about RAMROD, but you got to bring history. And so we spent some time looking all the way back to Seattle, because I think if you want to understand cycling in Redmond, you've got to start in Seattle. And I have had a wonderful time over the last 4 months preparing for this morning, and due in large part by the amazing information that you all have created and have made available online. So it's remarkable, and I was able to pull from that. So I'm standing on the shoulders of your giant effort to put that content together today, as well as a blog. You're probably familiar with the Redmond Neighborhood blog. They've done a wonderful job too. So I've pulled a number of stories from there. And this morning we're gonna go from 1879, you know, and look at primitive bike trails that are now plowed under I-5. We got to talk about the sign, of course. We're going to talk about Olympic champions. We're going to talk about famous senators that we remember. We're going to talk about the personalities that brought it to life, and of course, this wonderful thing that John created and Nikki created. And the bicycling is wonderful because there's so many dynamics to it. You know, it is an incredible invention. It's an enduring invention. It embraces technology and it changes. Its role in society changes. At one point, it was the fundamental way of moving around cities. And then it gave way to a vehicle called the car. And then it became a vehicle for children. And now it's much more complex than that. And it changes with the evolution, you know, and the patterns of society. And I think we're going to get a really good sense for that today, which is quite wonderful to get a chance to move through time that way. And if you don't mind, I'd love to do an exercise before I talk any further. I'd love for you all to close your eyes for about 15, 20 seconds. Go back to a time where you had a magical experience with a bicycle. Doesn't matter what age, but just go ahead and close your eyes and go, what was a delightful period that just lit up my life and was an experience that I never forgot? Okay, and now here comes the brave part. Does anyone want to share a story from going back? Thank you.
I can't remember the exact time, but I remember when I discovered Rails to Trails and became a member, and we've enjoyed so many wonderful rides, mainly back east where we sometimes go.
I love it.
Wonderful.
Rails to Trails, and increasingly and more investments are bringing that to people. I love that story. Anyone else?
I remember when my dad got me on my bike the first time, one of those without gears,
Oh, yeah.
foot brakes. And he was running, he was holding on to the back of the bike, and I was pedaling along. I said, "Dad, you can let go." He was way back too.
You were going, huh?
Well, John, I have a similar story because I learned to ride when I was a kid, and just remember the sense of freedom it gave me. My area was beyond my block. It was beyond my neighborhood. I could go places,
Yeah.
and my parents would let me
Yeah.
because I had a bike.
Yeah. The
Baseball cards with
the spokes. Yeah. I love John's word freedom. I think when you think about children and bicycles, that word comes fast, right? It really was that opening up. And in many ways, in years gone by, it was very safe to go explore the world on that bicycle as well.
I'm one of the oldies but goodies out here. We moved out here in November of 1944. And very little going on out here except the Derby days. There's a bicycle race going around Lake Sammamish. Can you reflect on any of that?
We're going to get to it, and I was already, I had some questions that came up, and I know there are many in the audience that are familiar with Derby Days, and so when we get to that section, please jump in and share some more.
I remember around 15, and I raced in the Derby, but at this time we weren't going on Lake Sammamish. And what I really remember, before like crazy that day, that afterwards somebody hosted a barbecue or a picnic, inviting everyone over, and we all descended on their house and sat and had food, and it was just a wonderful time. And I hope someone else here remembers that era, that even predicted that race. I didn't for you, but I missed it.
That gentleman, Steve Ristano, a good friend and a good compatriot on the road cycling, and a valuable member of the cycling community and to Redmond Cycling as well, a veteran of RAMROD and a leader of many rides. So Steve, thanks for sharing.
Well, tomorrow, this guy and I will look at Jerry's 61 years.
Congratulations.
Before either of us had driver's license. So he actually rode me home on the handlebars.
Well played. Anyone else? Oh, John, right behind you. Oh, okay. Hey, Tom.
So I just wanted to be a more recent reminiscence, and it was my second RAMROD. It was on my 65th birthday. And I'm sure everybody here has driven through Mount Rainier National Park. But to ride a bicycle through Stevens Canyon was one of the best moments of my life. It is like flying. It was a perfect day, sunshine, warm weather, and just coming down that big loop and down through the canyon was sublime.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
My story is pretty local.
You can.
I lived on 3rd Street, which now is 166th Avenue Northeast out front here. Was a dirt road when I was a little girl and lived here. And I had a bicycle. I finally got a bicycle, I think about age 13. I also bought my first bicycle at age 8. But I was going to come down to the school and ride around the track or ride around the parking area. And my dad told me, be sure when you get to the hill, walk your bike down the hill. But coming along, approaching the hill, I thought, well, I can do this. And so I got nearly to the end of the incline, and I took a royal spill. I bruised I skinned my knee and my elbow, and then I had to come down to the school to say I really did ride my bike at the school, and then I had to push my bike all the way home. It was a lesson in discipline, and listen to your dad.
Thank you. That's awesome. One more?
People are still coming. Oh my God.
I was about 6 years old when I borrowed/stole my neighbor girl's bicycle, going down the steep hill, and I was young enough at the time. I'm now old enough, but I thought I could turn the corner at the bottom of the hill with no hands. I was wrong. Many times I fell on my head and had stitches.
Mary, did you want one?
Yeah, real quick.
Here you go.
I was just thinking, we were all thinking about our first bike ride. I have a grandson, and my daughter had him riding when he was 2. I mean, we're talking about our first bike ride when we were 8. Now, they have these bicycles you don't even have to pedal. My 2, he was almost 3 years old. He was almost 3. But I mean, he didn't have pedal. It was like a scooter bike. I don't know what you call it. Balance bike. There's the name. It was new to me, but I was so proud of him. And this kid could barely walk, and he's riding a bike. Now, bicycles have changed in history, so let's listen to the talk.
Terrific. Did you want Deb? Deb's got one.
I have a very sad story. I was about 8 years old and had a good friend, Ginger, and she wanted to go biking. So she had a pink Schwinn bike. Yes. Fancy. So my parents said, okay, for your birthday, your 8th birthday, we're going to get you a bike. Come my 8th birthday, there's the bike, a J.C. Penney bike. I had to appear in public with my J.C. Penney bike and this pink Schwinn. It was sad.
Oh, you didn't like it. That was embarrassing.
Here's a perfect color for that. I grew up in East Bellevue, right around where Sherwood Forest is, around the border of Redmond. And so my parents bought there in '66. And so it was time for my first bike, and I was 6. And he was a new Boeing engineer, my dad was. And they had 3 babies. And so we went to St. Vincent de Paul to go get a red Schwinn. And I was being pushed along by my dad in Bellwood East and didn't yet know how to do those brakes on the pedals. So I stopped by hitting a curb, and I have a rock in my knee that is still there. And I want to say the only reason I know about balance bikes is that my grandchildren, Aunt Mary's great-great-grandchildren, the oldest one is Sylvie, are obsessed with biking. So they send out Mary videos of them biking.
Wow.
And we'll have one more story. Here you go.
When I was in 5th grade, I was in the safety patrol for the Rose Hill Grade School. And my duty station was at the Kirkland Redmond Highway and 132nd. And I'd been riding my bike up to my duty station before school every morning as it got darker and darker. And on a particular morning, I'm riding up to my duty station and I discovered ice for the first time. And I fell and slid into the city of Redmond across the Kirkland-Redmond Highway and nearly met a logging truck coming from the east who swerved around me, and it made me very concerned about bicycle safety for 9-year-old children to this day. So.
Thank you. All right. Well, that was incredible. Thank you. And part of the exercise is it's to remind ourselves that we kind of can take cycling for granted. We can take the bicycle for granted, because maybe it was 20 years when we had our last story, or we've done 50 rides. But just like many things in life, it's the people that matter, right? It's the people that take the object and create experiences, right? And bring people together or accomplish things. And we'll get into that now with a little bit of history. So we talked about, before we can get into Redmond, we got to go into Seattle. In just 20, 30 years into Seattle's existence, the bicycle shows up. And it doesn't take too long where it becomes really a fundamental part of mobility. Right, we've got walking, we've got horse and carriage, and then the bicycle shows up. And for a while, and maybe around 20 years, the bicycle actually has free reign of the streets, along with walking and horse carriage. And I love this picture because it's an example of the city putting together what are really formal bike paths in Capitol Hill. And so you see this group here, you can see the Lake Washington sign 5.5 miles away. I believe this spot currently sits underneath I-5 right now. And I think what's really remarkable about this picture is when you think about rails to trails and you think about cities trying to reinvent themselves to allow the cycling to continue. Well, in Seattle, it was inverted back in 1890. And then it became this transition where the car would take over. But before it did, we'll talk about clubs today, and I was able to find this picture, which is actually a Seattle Cycle Club from 1890. And it's a very formal picture. And quite remarkable because you see all age groups represented, you see men and women, owning bicycles, and the concept that there was a cycling club in 1890 seems really surprising to me, and yet very, very fun to learn about. And between 1890 and, of course, the 20th century, the big story that we already touched on is the race. And the race is a fun way to introduce the Derby, because in the beginning, the concept is literally a race. There's some kids and some adults going, hey, you guys should go race around the lake. And does anyone in the audience know some of the names of the very first race participants? Curious if anybody knew any of them. So I've got two, Ray Adams and Charlie Lentz.
No, right here.
Stan Fry.
Okay, and I'm sorry I didn't mention Stan. So I think about 14 to 16 racers would leave Redmond. And we talked about dirt roads on 3rd Street. This aerial photo of Redmond, it sets the stage for 1939. And I'll take a moment here for you to enjoy and find your position. Does everybody know where we're at right now on this photo? Yeah. So over here on the right-hand side, on the circle on the very right edge, is the skull. Can you see it right there on the midpoint? Right, and then the main streets in Leary are over here in the center point. So most of those roads are dirt roads, and when they send the kids off to go race around Lake Sammamish, there's a small section that's paved, but the majority of it was gravel. And as a result, I think only 4 or 6 actually were able to finish the ride. But it was great fun, and it turned into an annual event and an annual derby. And the spirit of it, besides betting on the kids in the first year, was to raise funds for the schools. And so the Derby would continue to evolve and really become a fixture in the community. And thanks to the Historical Society, there are a number of wonderful photos. They're also hanging in the library in Redmond today, too. And this scene here is in 1940, just a few years after the very first race. And so you get a sense for the scale, and now the crowds were starting to come. And the Derby and the Derby days would be built around it. This picture here is from 1947, and by the 40s, the Derby had now started to create categories of races. It became so popular. So you had, girls and boys, you had age groups. And this photo, I think, was from the parade before the race. And then it would continue to evolve. In the 50s, the mayors got involved. Does anyone know the story about the mayor races? I love this story. So at some point, I don't think this lasted very long, but if you can read this, Mayor Lewis Green of Redmond decided he would challenge all the other mayors from Bothell and Kenmore and others. And so the mayors had their own category, and for a time they were racing, which I'm sure that was a really good fundraiser. You can see the city evolving, over the years from 40 to 52. Pavements taking over. The buildings that you can recognize today there are in place. And the event would continue. This is a shot from 2011 celebrating the logo of the Historic Society and the sign, right? And it would continue all the way to 2019. And in its last 2 to 3 decades, maybe more, the race actually became sanctioned. And so the racers would come to actually compete, and those scores would matter. And so Redmond's criteriums were actually something that were part of the racing community, not just newspaper boys running around the lake in the 30s. And by 2019, and for many years, the Derby itself was advertised as the longest running cycling derby in the country, which was an incredible, statement for the northwest corner of the country and how long cycling's been around. I believe this was the last year, however, 2019, that the criteriums were held. And we still have Derby days and we still have cycling showing up, but that run from 1930s to 2019 would end in that year. Any other comments on the Derby before I move on? Yeah.
I came out here, like I said, about 1944. Lived on Lake Sammamish, gravelly roads, 10-party telephone lines, and mail came once a week. The reason I'm up here talking like this is because as a kid I noticed this. Lived out there, that they had blacktop coming on. I don't remember what year it was. By the mid-50s, though, the concrete started up on east side of Lake Sammamish.
Yeah.
That's the first point to make. The second point, there was a man who's passed away. He went to this school, Redmond High School, and this was the gymnasium. He played basketball in here. He told me personally that there were a bunch of men out summertime sitting around, and these kids were swirling around the blocks and whatnot, racing each other, and he said with some of the men, why don't we get that into the bicycle derby? Maybe we could do that around Lake Sammamish. Yeah, well, why not? That kind of baloney. So that's small time kinds of stuff, and the reason I'm up here to kind of throw that out, because a lot of the time things just don't happen. They kind of trickle into it.
Yep.
So I thought I'd just put that out.
I love that. And we're going to have a couple stories coming here where it starts with a trickle. It starts with an idea. It doesn't start from a big committee, right? It doesn't start from a city.
And laptop to the calendar, to your timeline.
Blacktop?
The roads game.
Yeah.
Did the race stop in 2019 because of COVID or because of sponsorship?
So the question is, did the race stop in 2019 because of COVID or sponsorship? And I had that same question. I wasn't quite sure. And John and I and Bill and others, we really felt the effect of COVID on RAMROD, and we'll talk about that a little bit. It had to have played an effect. Because it would suspend operations, and once things get suspended, they're really hard to reinstate. And so I would suspect they would give credit to COVID for that. Yeah, great question. All right, so we've got the Derby in its long history into the 70s, and then the next big investment happens, which is the Velodrome. I know it's part of Marymoor, but I think you associate the Velodrome with Redmond. And so in 1975, the Velodrome gets built, and I think it's built on an amazing fund of $169,000 from King County. So it's park fund money. And what's really remarkable about the Velodrome is it's just as relevant and thriving today as it was when it was installed in the 70s. And it's a really great story. And I think it's the combination of the Velodrome plus that deep history of the Derby that inspired some folks to say, you know what? We should put a sign with a bicycle on it, right? And so enter 1976. And this is a photo from the newspaper and the installation of the sign. And this sign has a great story, and I wouldn't have dug into it unless I had gotten a chance to meet Deb and talk to you all. Like you all, I've gone through it, and I remember when my family showed up here in the 80s, it was like, hey, what's up with that boastful claim of bicycle capital of the Northwest and the cool iron spike on top? Well, Jerry Torrell on the lower right is the gentleman who put this into motion. And I think Jerry, did anyone in the room know Jerry? Oh, right on.
He's in the Redmond Kiwanis Club still.
And I tried to get Jerry here. I just couldn't get a hold of him. I didn't know the right people. But I guess Jerry owned a dry cleaner, and a bunch of people would come in and say, you know, we need a Redmond sign out there. And so that set it in motion. And extra points this morning for anyone that knows the three on the left. Can anyone identify the three people on the left?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Mayor Young. Mayor Young on the far left.
Mayor Bud Young. Yep. And we're missing one more. There you go. There you go. Well done. So Fred, Kim, Jerry, and Bud.
The sign was built by Hardy Signs. You all remember Naomi. I get a call first thing after it was installed, and a woman said, "You've misspelled capital." It was C-A-P-I-T-O-L. And so I called Naomi, and she and her husband Jared came and got it and redid that board. So it's spelled right. Capital being like capital of the state, you know, that type of thing.
I love it.
One story.
That's a great story. The other story is the bike. So Jerry's like, hey, I think we should use one of those old-time bikes. And he goes to the high school and goes to the shop teacher. Says, could your students make this, you know, out of iron? And so the bicycle was actually made in the high school. Installed in 1976, it would be updated a little bit later. And on the internet, there's this wonderful blog post from Jerry, and that's him posing by the sign a few years ago. So great piece of history. Now, I want to segue to another Jerry, a guy named Jerry Baker, who is royalty in the community. Jerry passed away a number of years ago, but he's connected to the story from just a few minutes ago. And this is a picture of Jerry a few years before he passed. And Jerry was a very accomplished cyclist. He was someone who helped start the Seattle to Portland ride. He was very fast. I think he would race Seattle to Portland in the beginning and win it many times. He also was a very active volunteer at the Velodrome. And that's the connection back to 1975. And just a phenomenal figure. And I think, you know, I suspect is true for many people in the room. For cycling, Jerry, it wasn't just for himself and those accomplishments. He really gave back. And so he was particularly invested in youth and bringing youth along into cycling and into the other forms of racing and endurance. And so for that, when Jerry passed, the Velodrome officially became the Jerry Baker Velodrome, which is a really wonderful honor for Jerry. And John, I know you rode with Jerry at one point.
Well, sort of. I didn't actually ride with Jerry, but I was on the same ride with him. There's a difference. I was riding with Rebecca Twigg, and that was in '82. But STP started in 1979, and I was on the ride with Jerry, and I certainly knew of him, but I didn't know him personally. But in 1979, when STP was created by Paul and Sally Boyer, which was an inspiration for me, Jerry Baker, it was an official time trial, and Jerry Baker won it. Bob Freeman and I think Dave Shaw were on a tandem behind him. Now you have to understand, in 1979, to ride 192 miles in the rain, it was 40 degrees and raining really hard. This wasn't spitting, this was serious northwest rain. So some of us were borderline hypothermic, but Jerry just plowed right through that. I mean, this guy was terrific. And I think their time was like 10 hours and 28 minutes. But the three of them just powered their way through this storm. And so many of us the storm was just too much. It was hypothermia weather. But am I allowed to start here? No.
I'm gonna keep going with Jerry. That was good. Thank you. And I really love about our time together this morning is we talked about a park fund creating a slab of concrete in Velodrome, right? We talked about Jerry Baker and John, connecting on a ride in the 70s. The Velodrome's now the Jerry Baker Velodrome. And there's another connection, and John just mentioned Rebecca Twigg. And in the 80s, it was the beginning of the emergence of the American cyclist on the world scene. We had Greg LeMond. When we had a young, bright student in the Pacific Northwest, and her name was Rebecca Twigg. And Rebecca would come to the University of Washington not only as an athlete, but also a sharp mind. I think she enters into the school as a 14 or 15-year-old at the UW. And she's also a phenom on the bike. Well, a guy named Jerry Baker discovers Rebecca Twigg and says, "You're so good, you need to come to the Velodrome, and you need to race against the men," because they didn't have women racing at the time. And so Rebecca comes to the Velodrome and kicks butt. She also would kick butt at the Derby as well. And a phenomenal athlete. In 1984, in the Los Angeles Olympics, the very first road cycling events held. And Connie Carpenter, who was the matriarch of women's cycling in the United States, is putting her arm around Rebecca. They have just finished 1 and 2, gold and silver, in LA. And so in that intersection of cycling in our community, and there were other champions in the 50s and 60s that I know you're aware of, nobody shine brighter than Rebecca, who became a world champion multiple times, and of course the Olympic athlete as well. So a really amazing story. And Aunt Mary, I would love, because we're going to transition to a couple of the cycling clubs. We're going to talk about the Boeing Cycling Club and some of your escapades, and then we're going to talk about the Redmond Cycling Club and then lead into RAMROD. But before we go back into Redmond, are there any adventures you want to share with us?
Well, for 25 years, I was able to ride 3 or 4 days a week with the Boeing Bicycle Club. And I just can't say enough about what a great time. This was, they used to have annual trips down to Death Valley. Those are some of my friends, and unfortunately, they're mostly gone. But what a great time we had.
And then I think I have another photo. This photo here.
1992. This was one of our trips up to San Juan Islands, and that's at Friday Harbor. Gosh. Mia, the short one, was a native of the Netherlands, where, bicycling is everything. And she had cancer for many years, but still was able to ride her bike. I don't know if I've ever seen a more enthusiastic bike rider. That was Mia Hovnani, and she lived in Bellevue. That's her husband, Vahi, and that's Blake Howell. And Mary T, we were Mary T and Mary K in the bike club. Mary T was just a marvelous gal. Anyhow, that's just a small group of our gang get up in the San Juans.
How did you meet the Boeing folks?
Pardon?
How did you meet the Boeing Cycling Club?
How did I?
Yeah, how did you start cycling with them?
Well, after I retired from the Red Cross, the first thing I did was join the Boeing Bike Club, and then later Cascade Bike Club, and I enjoyed being a coordinator on Thursdays. One of my good friends and I coordinated the Boeing Bike Club's rides on Thursdays. Anyhow, great organization.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Aunt Mary. And so we'll go from Boeing to Redmond, and I'm going to introduce a gentleman who doesn't know that I'm going to introduce him because he's on his phone right now. But Bill, come on up. Yeah, I'm going to do it. So I've been attached to RAMROD since 2005, and I started volunteering because I fell in love with the ride in around 2008. And I hadn't met John yet. John had started everything back in the 80s, and I started volunteering on the website. Come on over, I'm not going to bite. And And I start to learn the ropes, right, and learn the ethos and the culture of cycling in Redmond and the club and in RAMROD from Bill and from others. And Bill is still active today. I would say of the core team, we probably average 25 years of involvement in the club and in RAMROD. And Bill, you're probably been associated with the ride for 35 or so.
Not that long. Rode my first ride, excuse me, 1999, and rode every one after that until I got too old.
And so Bill is going to be incredibly modest about everything that he's done and all the knowledge, but we've worked together for a number of years now on the Redmond Cycling Club. And it's a club like the Boeing Club that goes all the way back to the early 80s, the 70s. And these clubs that exist in the 50s and 60s, they were so important because we didn't have the internet. Right? We have printed books that didn't change very much. We had maps, but really it was institutional knowledge, right, that was in everybody's heads. And it was the ability to get together and get the confidence that we could go up to Rosario, right, or that we could go up to Snoqualmie, and who knew where the great roads were. Any thoughts, Bill, on the founding of Redmond Club or the early days that you'd love to share?
Well, that's hard to say. It was a club of a group of friends who got together to ride, and we put on a ride, and it got bigger and bigger, and it started out, people were baking cookies for the ride in their own kitchens, and those are the cookies for the food for the ride, and people would be making the food, and everything would be staged out of their own garages or homes. And we got more adept at it, and we got bigger and bigger and making a little bit more revenue, and then we could afford to hire some of this stuff done. So the ride became more and more sophisticated. It's very sophisticated now, but that original group was a group of friends who rode together every week. And some of the people like Greg Sneed, Tom Killian were sort of big movers in that, but it was a very social club, and that's how we got together. Because we didn't have the internet or meetups and things like that to connect us for rides. And now the feeling of a small group of club members is probably gone because those people are all old and retired. But the younger generation's coming in, and they're used to computers, and they make their connections on the computers. So things are a little bit different. I don't know if the days of the bicycle club with intimate relations amongst your friends where you get together to ride and eat every week will ever return. But those are good days.
Good day. Hold your mic up to your mouth so we can all hear you.
Sorry.
Behind you, the ferry boat, any recollection on that?
Oh, you got the ferry rides. Those are always good. Anyway, let me give it back to Joe. I'm the treasurer. He's the president for a reason.
Thanks, Bill. And Bill touched on the really important part, which was the group really was a bunch of friends that stuck together for the first 20 years. And cycling has changed, cycling clubs have changed. And one of the interesting dynamics of Redmond Cycling Club was it would become geographic. It really became a club that actually was the western side of Washington State. And so you'd have people from Edmonds down to Seattle, down to Tacoma, who were participating and still do today. And its identity would change from that close-knit friendship of friends to an event or a club that was really starting to find its niche in adventurous, challenging races. So we would look for the hard stuff. We'd look for hills. That's my son Christian and I headed to Stevens Canyon wearing that jersey over there. And we were able to stay social and meet, bi-monthly all the way up until COVID. And as you asked about the Derby, COVID, definitely impacted us, and we were unable to meet for 2 years. And now we've been coming back from that. And where the story really gets fun is at some point in the founding of RAMROD, as John and Nikki are running this early, incredible event, they intersect with the Redmond Cycling Club. And I think that's probably the right time for me to go ahead and hand the mic back to John.
Well, Joe mentioned Rebecca Twigg, and also Mary mentioned Cascade Bicycle Club. So this is the thread that I want to pick up here, because this leads to the genesis of RAMROD. I was part of the first STP, as I mentioned, with Jerry Baker, and that really inspired me. I met Paul and Sally Boyer in Portland after the ride was over, and so I'm going to go forward now to 1982 and how I met Rebecca Twigg spontaneously on the STP ride. Now, Seattle to Portland started off as a one-day ride. The first ride was in 1979, and that was an official time trial that Jerry Baker won. So every year I would do it as a one-day ride. In 1982, I got into Spanaway, and once again, it is just pouring rain. And I did something smart. I ate a whole bunch of cookies. And there's about 12 of us heading down towards Portland on the east side of Fort Lewis. And I'm very familiar with that territory. There's a series of railroad tracks that run at sharp angles. And it's so pouring rain, I really can't see who's with me. There must be about a dozen of us. I just happened to look to my right, and it's somebody with breast. And I look at my computer, we're doing 26 miles an hour. And then I see that famous jawline of Rebecca Twigg. And she's riding next to me. And she's like 18 years old. And here comes the first railroad tracks. Well, I know to line up at a 90-degree angle. And she got on my wheel, because she knew that too. And 3 of the 12 of us just wiped out on the railroad tracks because they didn't know to hit it at a 90-degree angle. So from then on, she was on my wheel. And each time we hit the railroad tracks, we lost 3 riders. And finally, after we went through all the railroad tracks, there was just 3 people left. Me, Rebecca Twigg, and Ron Heyman, 7-Eleven. Now, these people are professionals. They're world-class athletes. I'm just a mere, garden variety bicyclist. I knew I couldn't sustain that pace. Fortunately, there was a tree across the road because of the storm. And I got off her bike, Rebecca did, Ron Heyman, and I graciously said goodbye to him because there's no way I'm going to keep up with those 2. So that's my story about Rebecca Twigg. And, well, it didn't end there. I followed her in the Coors Classic, which she won the next year. I took my bicycle to Denver, and I followed her all throughout the Coors Classic on my bicycle. So, big Rebecca Twigg fan. So that takes us to the fall of 1983. And I had this probably unrealistic idea that STP is growing by leaps and bounds, and from people all over the country. And I wanted to showcase this premier ride, Seattle to Portland, by an alternate 2-day ride through Mount Rainier. And so what I did, I left my home 1 mile north of Green Lake, November 30th, 1983, by myself. And while I'm bicycling up Cayuse Pass, remember, at the end of November, it's pretty sharp days, so I was really moving. And I'm climbing up Cayuse Pass, and it suddenly just hit me that there must be some back roads from Enumclaw to Eatonville. And in case the STP people, Cascade Bicycle Club, reject my outlandish idea, so it's, circulating in my mind. I bicycle to Packwood, I then go on to Portland, I make my presentation to Cascade Bicycle Club. And Dave Shaw said, John, we've been thinking about this, and we're not going to fool with this great classic ride, STP. He says, but why don't you come up with your own ride? So I went home, got the maps, And so it started clicking, and Barclay Cruz was somebody I knew, the editor of the bicycle paper, and he generously gave me the mailing list. Now, for the bicycle paper, it's all the Pacific Northwest. So people from Oregon, Idaho, Canada. So basically, RAMROD started as a regional ride, not just here in the metropolitan area. Well, one other thing I needed to do was come up with a name for the ride. And so Angel Rodriguez, some of you may know him, he got drunk one day, and apparently a certain amount of lucidity developed, and he said, "John, I think you've got a potential for a classic ride here, but you need a good name." He says, "How about RAMROD?" I said, "Perfect."
Perfect. You do it right from away.
Yeah. Acronym, I love acronyms. So we had our name, and I came up with a date. It was the first weekend of July. So that was July 7th, 1984. And if you're going to do RAMROD, I did the first two RAMRODs. If you're going to do RAMROD, you know you've got to train for this. And so I came up with a training ride the week before the initial RAMROD. Now, the Road to Sunrise opens up the last day of June, usually. So this was June 30th, and two of my friends and I, we drove to Enumclaw. We rode our bikes up to Sunrise, and they just opened the road. And as we get up towards Sunrise, we start running into snow. And the snow was over our heads. They were literally digging out Sunrise when we got there. I have a photograph here of this, and unfortunately it's, not organized here, but some of you can see that there's a lot of snow here. Yeah. Okay. This is me and my two friends. Paul Atwood here designed the plaque. He's the one that came up with the RAMROD design. So this is my plaque, race director, RAMROD, 1984, 1990. So anyway, so we're up there, and we're sitting on the bench. This is the week before the first RAMROD. We're sitting on the bench, and I said, Paul and George Goszewski was up with us, and he's important later too. And I said, boys, I says, guess what? The first RAMROD is coming up next week. And there's this ranger sitting on the bench, and he overhears this, and he said, excuse me, are you talking about an organized ride around Mount Rainier? And I said, yes. And he says, you have to have a permit for that. So I go, oh, okay. And I said, just whom do I meet? And so I went to meet the possible day, Chief Ranger John Dixon, an elderly man. And so I told him about this new bike ride. And he says, well, John, he says, when is this bike ride going to take place? And I said, well, next weekend. He said, whoa, you have to have a permit. He says, there's not enough time for you to get a permit. And I said, Ranger Jensen, look at me. I says, with or without the permit, we're coming. Needless to say, we got the permit. But I want to advance just briefly into the future here. Greg Dudgeon, the current superintendent of Mount Rainier National Park, is putting RAMROD in jeopardy right now. If you listen to his slideshow, he said, one of the last things he says, he's from Alaska, is the parks belong to the people. So we got our first ride in, And 59 people started, 52 people finished, and fortunately, my wife there took care of Sunshine Point just inside, before it got washed away. Sunshine Point just inside the Park and Squally entrance. So basically, the first Ramrod, we had 3.5 volunteers. My son, age 5, was helping his mom. And we had one other, remember I mentioned George Goszewski. And George's role in this was to have a lot of bananas in water at the Grove of the Patriarchs. Would be the second food stop. First, Sunshine Point. We called it the Banana Grove of the Patriarchs. And so then he was supposed to leapfrog back to Enumclaw at the fairgrounds. So we had 3.5 volunteers to start the initial Ramrod. Fortunately, Mary Boss, the wife of Pat Merrick, who became race director in 91, 92, she was at the start-finish line. So she took everybody's time because it was an optional timed event. And then George couldn't get back in time. And Dick Gustafson from Oregon won it. And so we did it with 3.5 volunteers, and everybody loved it. The weather was great. And so we had something there. And so no problem. The word got out, and we had a lot more people the next year and the next year after that, and the ride just sort of took off by word of mouth. We didn't have this social media back then. Well, along comes 1989, and we're up to 600 riders. Now, who are these people? Who can order a custom-made bicycle? Who can train for Ramrod? Well, doctors, lawyers, dentists, professional people, terrific people like Joe here, who take the time to get ready. They know they just can't go out and be weekend warriors and get ready for a ride like. Greg LeMond went around the course with Gil Sneed, and he said, my God, this could be a stage of the Tour de France. And that's what I had in mind. That's why I came up with these Musette bags in 1987. So that the fast riders, the Swifty 50 people, we could just hand them the Musette bags with my wife's homemade Ramrod cookies and a ripe banana and a ripe nectarine and whatever food there, so they don't have to stop. So you can see the genesis of this ride taking off. And by 1989, we had music at the finish line. We had massage tables. I mean, it was great. It was just coming together. But the problem from the Park Service point of view is that we were growing too fast. And they put on the brakes. So we apply for our permit, and we get a letter from John Dixon in January of 1990. And it's like deja vu now. Joe and RCC gets a letter this past January, and it's kind of like a doomsday letter. And they were so concerned about the explosion of interest in Ramrod. You know, it could go from 600 riders maybe to 1,200 in 1991. So what they said, you can do the ride, here's the permit, but you can only have 200 riders. Well, I knew that meant the death of Ramrod. It can't survive with 200 riders. So I knew we had a battle on our hands, and so I got the word out to the 600 riders that did it the year before and anybody else I could remember. And the first thing, I know that Congress funds the national park system. So everybody has an Achilles heel. Superintendents have a lot of power, semi-autonomous units. And Neil Goosey was the superintendent at the time. He was wielding that power, and he decided to make an executive decision and really kill off Ramrod, but still giving us the permit. Well, My wife hands me the phone, and who is it? Senator Slade Gordon. I'm in the shower. And Senator Gordon says, John Dixon, you're the guy who created RAMROD, right? He says, what the hell's going on? He says, my office is being bombarded with angry phone calls and nasty letters. He says, what's going on there? And I said, well, Senator, thank you for calling, but they're trying to kill off the ride. And Jim McDermott and John Miller, they've all been engaged to help us. So we went on this campaign of letter writing and to persuade Neil Goosey. Well, you have to understand, once again, these people have a lot of power. And when they say the parks belong to the people, no, don't believe them. The parks belong to the rangers, okay? They got the power, okay? So you have your public statements, but then you have your private beliefs, okay? So you have to disabuse them a little bit, maybe shake them up a little bit. And Slade Gordon, he did his part. And so he said, come on, work with these people. And so we got to do the ride. But every ranger in the Northwest was there. And it was a very hostile environment on 1990. And so they had this survey, and I gave this to Joe. It's my 1990 file. And this survey was slanted against us. And they wouldn't give it to anybody on a bicycle or if they had bike racks in their car. But guess what? The outcome of the survey was 2-1 in our favor. Power to the people, right? So they were defeated. But if you have an adversary, you want to save face with these people. You're going to have to work with these people for years and years to come, maybe decades. So I'd always had a plan in my back mind to move RAMROD from a weekend to a weekday. So I came up the last Thursday of July, and they loved it because I had a meeting with them in August. So it created a certain amount of harmony and continuity for decades. And so now we have a new sheriff in town. That's Joe's term for Mr. Greg Dudgeon from Alaska. And so it's deja vu, it's David versus Goliath part 2. So that's where we're at right now.
Thank you, John. I got to interview John in 2015, and he's got 5 weeks of great stories. If you can stick around, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but if you can stick around and talk to John and Nikki, I highly recommend it. I know we have to wrap up real quick, and just a couple of closing thoughts on RAMROD. It's 150 miles in a single day. It's 3 mountain climbs. It's an incredible challenge to go after, and when people decide to go do RAMROD, they may choose to prepare 6 months, a year or 2 for the event. And so the relationship that a cyclist has with Mount Rainier is fundamentally different than getting in the car on a whim and driving on up. And it's a very special event. And when you're in the middle of the park and it's unfolding around you at the speed of a bicycle, and you don't know if you're going to finish the day or not, and that beauty's around you, it's transformative. And what John and Nikki created and what Bill has continued is an event that means something very deeply important to 1,000 people every year. And that's why it has persisted. And it is non-commercial. There's no advertising. When you show up at the start line, there's not a single corporate sponsor. I like to joke that the STP is the Alaskan Airlines Group Health, Seattle Mariners ride to Portland. It's just RAMROD, and there's not a single sponsor there. And it all goes back to the ethos that John created and that attracted people like Bill. And we sit around and we guard that ethos of that ride. And that's been what has kept it, and made it special for so long. And around 2006, when the storms came, and 2008, when Margaret Anderson, a ranger who was killed in the line of duty protecting people at Paradise in January of 2008, we realized that we had created an event event that was really a platform for doing more than just the cycling that we had come together. And so since then, we've been using the event to honor the park, honor the rangers. We've given over $200,000 in donations back to the park from the riders. We've reversed a trend in endurance cycling where women and endurance cycling was on the decline across the country. And we started to invest in that and reversed it. And we've had 1% improvements for the last 8 years. And then we began to look at how we could make it more inclusive and reached out to the Rainier cycling team in Seattle and started bringing that into our discussion. There's so much more to go do with it. So it's a very special event. And as John mentioned, we have experienced a little bit of challenge out of Mount Rainier this year. And in a nutshell, during the pandemic in 21, a new superintendent came in from Alaska. And he has a different point of view on what the park stands for. He has a very protective point of view on resources and limiting the surge that had been created in COVID. And somehow we got in his crosshairs and became a casualty. And I liken the situation as to they have a problem with cars and parking lots. And they're applying chemotherapy right now and decided that a bike event should also go, which has nothing to do with those parking lots. But we've been very fortunate to be able to lean on John, go back to his playbook, to reach out to the community, and really stand up for ourselves. And along the way, what we found out was this attitude from the superintendent wasn't just to us, it was really an attitude that was touching the small cities outside of Rainier. It was touching organizations that couldn't stand up for themselves because their livelihoods are based on those. And so as an organization that does this from the heart, we could do that. And so we said, no, we can't accept the terms that you've given us. They will kill the ride, and we will kill the ride to save the ride. And in doing so, we used a little bit of John's playbook, and we also relied on folks like you in the audience, and a gentleman like Arnie. Come on up here, Arnie.
Me?
Yes.
Yes, he's already been promoting the ride to me. Yes, yes.
I'm going to talk about Arnie in a second, but it's where we're at today is because folks like Arnie have written to Representative Schreier and Murray and to the park and said, I think you're miscalculating. There's something that's going on at this ride that is a heightened experience that is more than what's happening in your parking lots. And they've heard us. And it's not over, and we're looking at compromise. We're looking at allowing the ride to continue, maybe as an experiment, but to keep ourselves active and then return back to the park when the park calms down and maybe when the prevailing opinions are supportive. Arnie is somebody, have been associated with the ride since 2005. I probably have 500 memories that I could bore you all with. Arnie's one of them. And it's because this gentleman has shown up with this smile and this jersey at least 3 times every year that I've seen him. And I think I've seen you back to 2000 or so. And he always says hi to me. I say hi to Arnie.
Hi, how you doing?
Yep. And we pass on the ride as well. And would you like to share what RAMROD means to you really quickly?
Gosh, okay, my first RAMROD, kind of traumatic. There's cayuse. It's a toaster oven, late afternoon, toaster oven. So I see kind of a babbling brook, kind of like a waterfall on cayuse. You've seen it or heard it. So I say, hey, I'm in. So I jump into ice water, with a helmet. And back then there was a Bell helmet. And so Bell helmets back in the day, big dome head with sponges. And so it gets soaked, but I get right back on the bike, back up cayuse, but the sponges start to squeeze my brain. It just the pressure, couldn't take it, so I popped that helmet off, just too much pressure, and 2 rangers stop immediately, write a ticket, say, hey, you can't ride this thing without a helmet. I say, hey, man. So they write me a ticket, $50, 1992, about $100 today, about double. So, man, you know, all that pressure, and then to get financial penalties for riding this. And I said, I got to do this again, you know. So I've been back with my friend, the good doctor, Dr. Morelli. Man, yeah, he's game, and we're game. And this ride, gosh, love it to continue. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Arnie. I love it. In addition to reaching out to the senators, we also got dozens of stories that we weren't expecting and asking for. And it's what makes the ride, it's what makes clubs, it's what makes communities embracing cycling so important. I got a mail from a gentleman who was recently paraplegic. And in trying to figure out what his next thing was, somebody challenged him to ride a handheld bike. And he had picked this year to be the year he was going to be the first to do that on RAMROD. And we just were like, wow, we're going to help you make that happen. I got a letter from a woman who I remember when she joined 6 years ago, and she just said, hey, look, you know, this ride is something that made me a stronger woman because I went after the challenge and you all supported us. And so we get dozens of stories, and it's multi-generational now. I ride because my father rode with John in the 80s. I've gotten dozens of those stories, and I'm in that category because I got to ride with my son in 2016. I forget what the year was, the first. He was 15 years old, and if we had only done that once, it would have been a lifetime memory, and I owe that to John and to Nikki and to my son and my wife. So this event has been incredible. I would love to talk about it more, and John and I and others, if you have questions later. We've put jerseys on the outside, and one of the great things about the jersey is it's that affirmation of the respect that we have for our ability to be in the park. And so every jersey embraces the mountain, and it expresses the mountain in a different visual style. So as you look there, you'll see the mountain in each of those jerseys. So that's about half of the jerseys that have been created. The oldest one is 1987 on the left, in those crazy teal colors over there.
Are they for sale?
No, those are Joe's. Good question, though. But there are some T-shirts in the back. Those are free. Those are from last year's event. So please grab one for your friends or yourself if you'd like. So let's wrap there. I appreciate everyone's patience, and I think we have a little bit of time for Q&A. Is that okay, John?
2 minutes.
2 minutes for Q&A. All right, can you help me with this?
Was there one question right there?
How can we help you to try to get this ride reinstituted for this year? Is there anything that we can do? Or you have a national mailing list as well, as I understand it.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. How can we help, with the cause and get the right discussions and a reversal going on? I think at this point in time, I think we've had a really good, sufficient amount of outreach, and we're really close to coming up with a pilot version of RAMROD. I can't announce it today, but we are working very hard and looking at the possibility of bringing the ride into early September, and then to treat that as an experiment to see how it might work, and then decide what to do in 25. So I really appreciate the question, and for the moment, I think we're right where we need to be.
Okay, well, Joe is going to be up here with our other guests. Thank you so much, Joe and John and Mary. This has been wonderful. I've learned so much riding the STP once with Deborah and Sally over here. We had a problem. We were 2 days. By the time we got to the beer garden, it was closed.
Oh, no.
Quite a turn. Well, let's give them a hand. Thank you. A couple of things. The program will be back in September, so if you're newbies here, we'd enjoy having you join the rest of our throng. And you can look for that on our website at redmondhistoricalsociety.org. The recording of this program will be available, so if you'd like to see it again or tell friends about it, it'll be out here in a few days. And thanks again to our many volunteers. Also thank Cynthia and Mary Sullivan as you depart. They've been handing out goodies out there, and they're an important part of our volunteer organization, as well as all of our other volunteers. So thank you again, and for those of you in your cycling get-ups and everything, come on up here and we'll get a group photo of colorful buddies of Joe and the team. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your weekend.